Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
I saw this court ruling this week. It's not a constitutional case. It's not a challenge to the lockdowns. It's not a grievance against an employer forcing a vaccine mandate on a union. It's the most ordinary, dreary court case there is. Family law, which is code for divorce court. And of course, the worst divorce proceedings are those involving kids. Just misery all around, misery where only the lawyers profit. And misery attracts misery. Imagine how many divorce cases involving children have been weaponized by the lockdowns, masks, vaccine shots, so much more to argue about. The most bitter disagreements have been made worse because of the strife we're in. And so it was in this case called JN versus CG. Those are the initials of the parents, kept anonymous for the sake of the kids. Here's a court ruling. It was a case heard exactly a week ago, and the ruling was issued on Tuesday, which is a pretty quick turnaround. It was written by Justice Alex Pazarats of the Ontario Superior Court. I'm going to read from it at length because the judge writes in a way that I would rather quote directly rather than to summarize and restate. Most judges don't write like this, Judge. You'll see what I mean. Let me start literally with the first sentence. When did it become illegal to ask questions, especially in the courtroom? And when did it become unfashionable for judges to receive answers, especially when children's lives were at stake? How do we lower our guard and let the words unacceptable beliefs get paired together? You know who said that? That's what Justin Trudeau said the other day. I don't know if you recognize it.
The way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
In a democracy, on the scales of justice, should judges sit back as the concept of judicial notice gets hijacked from a rule of evidence to a substitute for evidence? And this is my favorite part, is misinformation even a real word? Or has it become a crass, self-serving tool to preempt scrutiny and discredit your opponent, to delegitimize questions and strategically avoid giving answers? Blanket denials are almost never acceptable in our adversarial system. Each party always has the onus to prove their case, and yet misinformation has crept into court lexicon, a childish but sinister way of saying, you're so wrong, I don't even have to explain why you're wrong. It's an incredible ruling, would you agree? What does any of this have to do with family law? Sadly, these days, it has everything to do with family court. Because when society demonizes and punishes anyone who disagrees or even dares to ask really important questions, the resulting polarization, disrespect, and simmering anger can have devastating consequences for the mothers, fathers, and children I deal with on a daily basis. It's becoming harder for family court judges to turn enemies into friends when governments are so recklessly turning friends into enemies. Governments are. The motion before me is a typical and frightening example of how far we are drifting from Chair's values. Wow. Now, I'm going to keep reading if you don't mind. There's so much here, I don't want to miss a word. I can't read you the whole ruling. So now the judge summarized the case. The father wants 2 children ages 12 and 10 to receive COVID vaccinations. The mother is opposed. Now answer honestly, did the previous paragraph give you enough information to form an opinion about how this case should turn out? It's a clever question from the judge, isn't it? You don't normally see clever questions in court rulings. Judges try to give clever answers, but he's making a point, I think. We're all weary. We all wish COVID would just go away, but pandemic fatigue is no excuse for shortcuts and lowering our standards. We all have to guard against the unconscious bias of thinking, why won't these people just do what the government tells them to do? I can't believe this guy's a judge. I'm surprised he wasn't thrown off the bench yet. We have to decide on the basis of the best interests of each particular child in each particular fact situation. We have to rely on and insist upon evidence. So I'm going to skip ahead. Just FYI, the family came to some agreement last fall about a few things, and one of the kids decided to get vaxxed, and both parents agreed to it. But the littler kids, well, the mom was skeptical, in part because they both got the virus and recovered from it naturally, so they have natural immunity. Let me read a little bit more from the ruling. Soon after the party signed minutes in October 2021, the older child, CBG, elected to be vaccinated. Both parents supported his decision. He's had 2 shots, and the parents agree he has exhibited no adverse effects. The mother insists the father is misrepresenting her position. She is not opposed to vaccines. She's offended by the pejorative term anti-vaxxers. She has always ensured that the 3 children received all of their regular immunizations. She says she's open-minded to vaccinating both younger children if safety concerns can be better addressed. But she says her extensive research has left her with well-founded concerns that the potential benefit of the current COVID vaccines for LAG and MDG, those are 2 of her younger kids, is outweighed by the serious potential risks. She says there are too many unknowns, and she worries that once children are vaxxed, they can't be unvaxxed. The mother notes that both children have already had COVID with minimal symptoms, and they have recovered completely. She refers to medical research which says that since they have already recovered from COVID, the children now have greater protection from future infection. Well, we know that's true. Both parents agree LEG and MDG, those are the kids, are in excellent health with no special medical needs or vulnerabilities. Neither parent provided any evidence from a medical profession about any potential positive or negative considerations with respect to these children receiving COVID vaccines. The mother's evidence focused entirely on the medical and scientific issues. Okay. Now here is the part of the ruling that I think is very interesting, at least to me. In contrast, the father focused extensively on labeling and discrediting the mother as a person in a dismissive attempt to argue that her views aren't worthy of consideration. This odious trend is rapidly corrupting modern social discourse. Ridicule and stigmatize your opponent as a person rather than dealing with the ideas they want to talk about. Seems to be working for politicians, but is this really something we want to tolerate in a court system where potential conduct and beliefs are irrelevant except as they impact on the parent's ability to meet the needs of a child? Let's talk about cancel culture. For example, the father's affidavits included the following. I am aware that the applicant has political affiliations with the People's Party of Canada. The applicant is entitled to her personal beliefs and ideologies, but I am very fearful that it is having a direct negative impact on the children, especially when it comes to this vaccine issue. I searched the applicant's recent Facebook postings and was alarmed to see just how involved the applicant is at perpetuating COVID-related conspiracy theories and vaccine hesitancy. He attached a collection of some of the applicant's Facebook postings, which I believe are indicative of her personal views. The applicant is a self-proclaimed PPC founding member. In my opinion, she is openly promoting very dangerous beliefs. Surely, these thoughts and feelings are also being promoted in her household, which is where LEG and MDG primarily reside. I looked up what the PPC stance is on the COVID-19 vaccine and was not surprised to read under its website's facts section that lockdowns, mask mandates, school closures, and other authoritarian sanitary measures have not had any noticeable effect on the course of the pandemic. Unfortunately, no facts are actually provided. He attached a copy of the PPC's COVID policy taken from its website. I'm alarmed that the children are being exposed to the applicant's unsupportive views on the issue of the pandemic, and in particular the efficacy of the available and government-recommended vaccines. The applicant's anti-vaccination stance is much more severe than that of a regular concerned parent who is unsure whether or not she wants the children to receive a relatively new vaccine. Rather, the applicant is leading the charge, attending anti-vaccine rallies, and refusing to follow COVID protocols. He attaches a Facebook posting of a mother not wearing a mask in a crowd of 10,000 people at a rally. He makes other references to the mother's Facebook account and attaches numerous pictures of her social media pages. He attaches photographs of PPC leader Maxime Bernier addressing an audience. Well, that ought to decide any divorce case right there. If you have a picture of Maxime Bernier, makes sense to me. So a political attack on his ex-wife, based on her political beliefs, disagreeing with his political beliefs. So we hear. Maybe he doesn't agree. He's just using it as a weapon. And here's what the judge said. Where to begin? A, how is any of this relevant? B, have we reached a stage where parental rights are going to be decided based on what political party you belong to? Yeah, I think we're there already, Judge. C, is being seen with Maxime Bernier, or anyone for that matter, the kiss of death as far as your court case is concerned? Yeah, I think we're at that point, Judge. D, can you simply utter the words conspiracy theorist and do a mic drop? E, if you allege that someone is openly promoting very dangerous beliefs, shouldn't you provide a few details? A bit of proof, maybe? F, and if you presume that a parent believes things they shouldn't believe, can you go one step further and also presume that the parent must be poisoning their children's minds with these horrible unspecified ideas? Surely these thoughts and feelings are also being promoted in her household. G, the father criticizes the mother for doing something she didn't say. He presumes she doubts the effectiveness of school closures and then criticizes her for providing no evidence. But on this motion, she didn't raise the issue. And back in 2020, she was the one who wanted to keep the children out of school, and he fought unsuccessfully for them to attend. As with other allegations, the father provides no evidence of his own and fails to address the fact that vigorous community debate led to school closures being abandoned. H, how far are we willing to take guilt by association? If you visit a website, read a book, or attend a meeting, are you permanently tarnished by something someone else wrote or said? At what point do the thought police move in? Oh, Judge, we're there. We're there a long time ago. I, and really, how fine is the line between vaccine hesitancy and not taking any chances with your kid? All of the case law says judges have to act with the utmost caution and consider all relevant evidence in determining the best interest of the child. How can we then impose a lesser standard on a demonstrably excellent parent? It is of little consequence that an individual litigant chooses to advance such dubious and offensive arguments. Even though the father may not admit it, this is still a free country, and people can say what they want, including him. I'm not going to read the whole thing. That would be just ridiculous, but it really is a riveting discussion. The judge then discusses other cases where children were being fought over by parents with different points of view on the vaccine in divorce court. And in some of those cases, the kids were forced against their own will to have the jab. How terrible is that? Here's what this judge had to say about that. To simplify matters, the mother does not deny the authenticity or integrity of the website information submitted by the father. It's mostly statements by the Government of Canada and the Canadian Pediatric Society recommending that children should receive COVID vaccinations. These are the same types of downloads which courts have considered in other recent COVID vaccine cases. The mother doesn't deny that these are reputable organizations, nor does she deny the statements and information have been prepared by qualified persons in a responsible professional manner. She doesn't deny that the father has accurately presented one side of the story. All she asks is that the court equally consider the other side of the story, that the court allow both sides of the story to be equally presented, tested, and considered before making an irreversible decision for her children. Evidence on both sides of the story. We're in deep trouble if those become antiquated concepts. Yeah, Judge. Yeah, we are. In almost all cases with COVID vaccinations have been ordered, the court has made a finding that on the face of it, the internet materials presented by the objecting parent have been grossly deficient, unreliable, and at times dubious. This lack of an equally credible counterpoint to government recommendations may well have been determinative in those earlier cases. In other words, the courts choose who to believe or not. But here this judge says, what if the objecting parents presents evidence which potentially raises some serious questions or doubts about the necessity, benefits, or potential harm of COVID vaccine for children? Clearly, we shouldn't be too quick to embrace the naysayers, but should we banish them without hearing from them? Should we stifle and forbid a reasonable opportunity to present and test evidence and make submissions? There are obvious public policy reasons to avoid recklessly undermining confidence in public health measures, but That has to be weighed against our unbridled obligation to leave no stone unturned when it comes to protecting children. For example, the mother presented a detailed fact sheet from Pfizer. This isn't one of the fringe websites dismissed in the other cases. It's Pfizer, the people who make the vaccine. And one of the things the judges leans on is the authoritativeness of the cases relied on by the mom. I'll read some more. Several of the earlier decisions requiring children to be vaccinated have noted that the evidence presented by the objecting parent was not reliable because the author's credentials were either non-established or non-existent. But in this case, none of the materials presented by the mother are from fringe organizations or dubious authors. To the contrary, the mother quotes extensively from leaders in the medical and scientific community. Now, I thought the next point showed some humanity from the judge, which is very rare these days. In a complex, important, and emotional case like this, it is important to remember the court's mandate. I am not being asked to make a scientific determination. I'm being asked to make a parenting determination. I'm not being asked to decide whether vaccines are good or bad. I am not being asked to decide if either parent is good or bad. My task is to determine which parent is to have decision-making authority over LEG and MDG, the kids, with respect to the very specific and narrow issue of COVID vaccinations. Each parent has clearly identified how they would exercise such decision-making authority. The judge gives the decision-making authority to the mom, who had parenting roles post-divorce anyways. Now, so that's how the judge ruled. But look at the PS from the judge at the end. Postscript. It's irrelevant to my decision, and it's none of anyone's business, but I am fully vaccinated. My choice. I mention this because I'm acutely aware of how polarized the world has become. We should all return to discussing the issues rather than making presumptions about one another. I read about half this ruling to you. I just thought it was interesting. I don't think this will be overturned on appeal because family law is so fact-based, and I don't think the ruling here is so patently wrong that a higher court would overturn it. But I have to say, this is literally the first judge in Canada to consider a pandemic lockdown, forced vaccine issue and not join the hysterical screaming and denunciation of people who are dissident minorities. Compare him to the judges who have, for example, thrown Pastor Arthur Pawlowski into prison, who have banned him from even speaking in public in ways that contradict the government. Churches physically seized by police, people being fined tens of thousands of dollars for merely disagreeing, millions of Canadians banned from flying or taking the train just for not being vaxxed, even if they are naturally immune. Countless people being fired for the same reason. I wonder if this judge will be overturned just for that reason, that he's insufficiently furious and insufficiently intolerant of the mom who disagrees with the majority. He probably wouldn't destroy businesses or seize bank accounts like the government has done. Will he be able to hold on to his position as a judge? Will they kick him out as a judge? It's happened before. I'm happy to see this case. It's too bad that it only applies to one family, and we don't even know who they are. But maybe it's a small sign that even our courts are starting to realize that they've been part of an atrocious restriction on our civil liberties for far too long, and maybe it's time for them to walk back from the abuses of the government. I wonder if the trucker rebellion had anything to do with this.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.